This is Issi Noho. This is where he lived until Sally and Andrew and Neil discovered him. This is what it said on the wooden packing case until Sally removed the branches that covered it. This is the house the children built for him in the big sycamore tree at the end of their garden. Issi Noho.
Today's story is called Panda Sandwiches Are Most Indigestible. Issi snuggled down into the luxuriously soft cushioning of his front row seat. It was the first time he'd ever been to the theatre. The Martins had decided to include Issi this year in their family outing to see Jack and the Beanstalk. Issi was particularly excited because he knew that it was a story about a magic beanstalk, and he was anxious to see whether Jack's magic bean worked as well as his own magic. Jack's mother had just thrown the bean out into the garden, and already a huge plant was beginning to grow on the stage. There was no blinding flash or puff of smoke, but the magic was working most efficiently. And then it happened. Issi's sharp eyes detected a piece of string attached to the top of the so-called magic beanstalk. And because he was in the front row, he could see a wheel high above the stage. The string was being pulled over the wheel by unseen hands. It wasn't really magic after all, but a trick. Although Issi felt disappointed and cheated, his first concern was for Andrew and Sally. If they noticed the string, then the spell would be broken for them as well. Issi set to work to help the pantomime out with a real piece of magic. He quickly scribbled a magic rhyme onto the back of his programme. The children were too interested in the show to notice Issi taking out a magic card. Before the children see the string and know it's just a trick, please make a really magic beanstalk grow, and please be quick. Issi filled the number 14 into the empty square of his magic card. There was a blinding flash and a huge puff of smoke engulfed the stage. Jack, who was about to climb the beanstalk, stopped in surprise. But the show had to go on, and as the smoke cleared, there was the beanstalk still growing in front of him, so he grabbed the lower branches and began to climb. He'd climbed almost out of sight when it happened. A loud and terrifying voice boomed into the theatre.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman.
Jack, the actor, froze. He looked terrified. He's acting very well, said Andrew. The voice continued.
Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread.
An enormous hand reached down from above the stage and gripped Jack. He struggled, very realistically. Jack's poor mother stared up in horror, and then she too began to climb the huge beanstalk. Help! Help! Jack's cries seemed to be coming from a long way away. Then two men, dressed in ordinary clothes, rushed onto the stage and began to climb the beanstalk. Issi immediately decided that this was the cue for anyone who wanted to climb the magic beanstalk, and he leapt onto the stage. Come on, Sally! Come on, Andrew! This is the real thing! He called out. Get that panda off the stage! Shouted a red-faced angry man from the wings. The curtains closed, and a very important-looking man in a dinner jacket stepped out. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we're very sorry, but... His voice was drowned by the clatter and scuffling coming from behind the curtain. Here, come on down at once! It was one of the stagehands calling after Issi, who was now disappearing up the beanstalk through a hole which the plant had made in the roof of the theatre. The beanstalk went up, and up, and up. There was no sign of Jack now, but his mother was just disappearing into the clouds, and the two men were close behind her. Issi climbed on and on. He was particularly good at climbing, and soon he too was disappearing into the clouds. When his head popped out on the other side of the clouds, the sight before him made him draw in his breath. A narrow, winding road led away into the distance right up to the door of a magnificent and enormous castle. There was no sign of Jack, his mother, or the two men who'd followed them. Issi stood by the huge wooden door of the castle. He looked behind, but nobody else seemed to be following him. Suddenly, the door in front of him opened. Issi found himself gazing into the toe cap of an enormous boot. Suddenly, everything went black, and he felt himself being whisked through the air at great speed. Then, all was light again. Issi's feet were standing in something quite soft and spongy, and he was aware of a huge eye peering at him very closely.
Well, well,
A voice boomed at him.
I am a popular giant. So many visitors in one day. You're a very strange, furry creature.
Issi was standing on the open palm of a huge hand. It was the hand of a giant. "What have you done with Jack and the others?" said Issi defiantly.
Aha!
Boomed the giant, his huge mouth opening like a cavern.
They are quite safe and sound. I'm fattening them up.
"Fattening them up?" said Issi. The giant prodded Issi in the tummy with an enormous finger.
But you seem to be plump enough to eat already,
he said. Issi was tossed onto a huge slice of bread, and before he could say or do anything, another large slice was dropped on top of him. He wriggled and squirmed his way to the edge and poked his head out. He was perilously near the giant's cavernous mouth. "Hold it! Hold it!" he cried out. His brain was thinking furiously. "Panda sandwiches are most indigestible," he blurted out. "In fact, they're poisonous."
Poisonous?
said the giant. "Poisonous," repeated Issi. "I'd give you a terrible tummy ache if you ate me."
That's not good,
said the giant.
I have a very big tummy, and when it aches, I have a lot of ache. Perhaps if I cook you first, you won't be poisonous,
he said. "Oh, worse than ever," cried Issi desperately. If you cook me, I become even more poisonous."
Even more poisonous,
the giant repeated. With this, he dropped Issi onto the kitchen table, and an enormous colander was placed over him.
Stay there while I decide what to do with you,
said the giant. Shafts of light from the holes in the colander pierced the gloom of Issi's prison. His mind worked frantically on a magic rhyme to save Jack, his mother, the two men, and, not least of all, himself. Suddenly, the lower edge of the colander was lifted. "Quickly, in here!" It was Jack's voice, and Issi was joined by Jack, his mother, and the two men. "Didn't I see you sitting in the front row of the theatre?" said Jack to Issi. "You did," said Issi. "It's a very good show, but it's getting a bit scary." "Scary?" said Jack. "It's terrifying. Goodness knows what's happened, but something's gone very wrong indeed." He looked out through one of the holes. "I think," began Issi, but he was interrupted. "The giant's fallen asleep. Now's our chance to escape," said Jack. They all crawled out from under the colander and slid to the edge of the table. They peered down to the floor below. It was a very long way. But fortunately, the tablecloth had plenty of tufts and holes to gain a foothold, and soon the party were making their way down. They jumped the last bit to the floor. The giant stirred. They squeezed through a crack under the front door and were soon racing towards the top of the beanstalk. A sudden bellow warned them that the giant had woken up and discovered their escape. The ground began to shake as they hurriedly slid down the stalk. They landed in a heap on the stage. "Quick, quick, cut the thing down!" yelled Jack. "The whole pantomime has come to life. There's a real giant after us." The stagehands hacked at the beanstalk, and very soon the whole stage was a mass of falling leaves and beans. Although they were safe, a loud noise like thunder could be heard above them. The man in the dinner jacket stepped in front of the curtains again. "We very much regret,"
that we cannot continue with our show tonight.
Issi pushed his head through the curtains. "Where on earth have you been?" cried Andrew.
I,
said Issi,
have decided to become an actor. I think actors have a very exciting life.
"You," said Sally, "are coming home with us."
Oh,
said Issi.
it sounds as though I have some explaining to do. Again.